What's up, you guys? My name is Mr. Wolf, and welcome back to another episode of LEGO Arts. So, in the last episode, we did a solo minifigure showcase featuring Black Canary in her Season 8 outfit from Nero. So, for this episode, this might be the last showcase of 2019. It's not a guaranteed, and I'll talk about that towards the end of the video. But for this episode, we are doing a showcase of back again with LEGO Devil May Cry. This time, Devil Trigger Edition. So here we have Nero Devil Trigger, Dante Sin Devil Trigger, and Virgil Sin Devil Trigger. These guys were a little bit harder to do than compared to some of the other DMC minifigures, because each of them are 100% hand painted, hand sculpted, and the whole 9 yards. So these were a little bit trickier to do because Devil Trigger is a lot more detailed, and there are some aspects of it that are a bit more complicated than the original formats. So figuring out taking Devil Trigger and interpreting it into minifigure format was a little bit trickier than the other ones. But when I finally figured it out, this came out as the final result. So, as you guys know the whole drill, we're going to take these minifigures one at a time to review them, explain my process, why I went with this route, and then go from there. So, without further ado, let's get the pedestal out and get the showcase on the road. So, to kick this showcase off is, of course, Nero with his full fuck you transformation in his Devil Trigger, or Devil Bringer, as it was called. So, out of the figures, this one was probably the easiest to do, and I'll explain that when it gets to the Sin Devil Triggers. But first, going on with Nero's Devil Trigger. So, when doing this was a little bit trickier to do than I thought. For starters, of his wings. So like his claw wings, if you've played DMC5, and when you complete the game either on human mode or Devil Hunter mode, I think is what the other one was called. By the end of it, you acquire Devil Trigger form, which also gives you these energy wings. They don't always show up unless you're using the super skin, but when they do, they basically act as one of Nero's breakers. That allows you to grab enemies and sort of it acts as more of Nero's bringer from DMC4. So when doing these wings, it was a bit tricky of not just sculpting out the wings, but also placing them in a specific way so that not only do they stay on, but also so that if I wanted to, I could use some articulation in the arms. So placing them on was a bit of a challenge. But what I did was, after sculpting them out, I superglued them onto this hairpiece that I had, and I actually had a few extra of these hairpieces from some knockoff minifigs I had. So I used this as sort of a base to keep the wings together. I almost thought about having one of those clear packs that LEGO likes to use for applying on wings or jetpacks, but that would have looked stupid. And also would have been a pain in the ass to sculpt, as well as possibly even sand it so that way the hairpiece can stay on, as well as putting that bit on with the wings. So that would have been a fucking mess. So I decided to scrap that and just go ahead and just have it all as one build. And it actually turned out pretty well. You can see he's got his horns in the hair. And the hair, this at first was all in one piece, but then when I double checked that the hair, how the hair design was, I quickly sanded that off and just re-glued and then repainted and did them on. You could kind of see a little bit of paint in the back. I didn't do too much of it because there wouldn't be too much of it shown, but I do have the blue energy in the back to sort of represent the wings are attached to his back. I also did a little bit of detailing on the wings, I tried on painting on feathers like they have in the game. You could kind of see I tried sculpting out the claws, but I didn't fully sculpt all of them out. On his character design, he's got claws as sticking out of his shoulders. I had no idea how to take that and interpret it into a minifigure because of the way of how their arms are built, as well as their shoulders. So the closest that I got of replicating that is just painting it onto the shoulders. Which isn't too much. And it also actually was a better alternative because I forgot to paint the base color turquoise on the shoulders because of the wings. So it would have looked ridiculous. Speaking of with the turquoise, I sort of made my own kind of turquoise color, so I combined like two different blues as well as the same green and green that I used for my Green Arrow and my Green Ranger minifigures. Sort of combining those together in order to form like this turquoise color. That actually came out pretty well. The eyes, the original face was from a knockoff Captain America minifigure that I had. That I felt fit up pretty well of Nero's double trigger face. So I painted around the eyes as well as the mouth, and then afterwards I came back with an orange and a golden yellow like acrylic markers, and painted the eyes a little bit, and then I went with a Sharpie and sort of did like those silts that the pupils have, and with the eyes came out pretty well, very well. I don't know how well you can see it, but he also has like eyebrows on top of those. I probably could have just like painted those up, but since the bangs kind of cover it, it's not too big of a deal. I will say that the painting on the face, like the markings, could have come out better, and I did not realize that until I had finished it. Did I realize that I accidentally messed up the markings too much, but by the time I figured that out, it was too late, so it was just like, alright, screw it, we'll just keep it on as it is. It's because I didn't know if I could replicate that same paint color that I used for the base. But anyways, going on further, you can see like some detailing on the torso. I had to double check a few times of like how that detailing looked, and then when I finally figured it out, I took like a light blue marker, then drew out the detailing, including on like some of like, I'm pretty sure these are supposed to be the energy markings of like the claws, so where they're supposed to be on Nero's shoulders. Same thing on his sides of like these scales, else that I double checked to see if they continue on down like his waist, and they don't. They just end at the sides. You could also see, I don't know how well you can fully see, but I did some detailing on like his arms to match up with like his bringer. On both sides. I thought that this was like a cool little detail, as sort of like a reference back to Nero's original bringer, like his original arm. I didn't like paint on one of his breakers because I felt that like that would look kind of a little bit weird, And since I already painted Overture on the original Nero minifigure, I figured out like it'd be better to just do the bringer to not only match up with the character, but also as sort of a callback to DMC4. And for the legs, I considered the idea of doing like clay of like adding those spikes, but that would have looked ridiculous since a majority of this was already hand painted. So I just settled down for a marker and drew on the detailing as best I could. I didn't do all of it because when you're working with a minifigure and with like a certain tool like a marker, it's really hard to get. It's a pain in the ass to get like those really small details on those. If there was a decal, it probably would have come out better. But aside from my female characters, none of my other DMC characters have decals, and I wanted all of this to be hand painted. So aside from those minor details, I think this came out pretty cool. I can't remove the hairpiece without breaking anything, but all in all, I think this came out pretty well. And reason why he's not equipped with like Red Queen or Blue Rose is because I technically already made those for Nero, so it would seem kind of pointless to replicate that weapon in the same way for this character. And plus, I didn't want the paint coming off with the hands because that has happened in the past. But all in all, I'd say this character came out pretty awesome. And still to this day, Nero has the best transformation call I have ever heard. Now then, let's move on to our next minifigure. So next up on our list is probably my favorite Devil Trigger I've ever seen, and that is Dante's Sin Devil Trigger. This one was harder to do than Nero. Both him and Virgil were really, really hard to do. So when first approaching this character, for starters, it was kind of hard to figure out like how tall did I want this character to be. Like, one of the things that I was kind of wondering, like, should I make him taller? Like, should I use, like, a Woody minifigure that I used for, like, Jack Skellington? or should I do what I did for Goofy and Boris and just add like some studs underneath? But then upon closer looking at the character, I realized that Sin Devil Trigger is just about the same size as like regular Dante and standard Devil Trigger. So a size difference didn't really make it up too much, so I decided to scrap that off. However, as you can see, there's a clear brick piece underneath, and the main reason why I have that on is because of his feet as well as his wings. So when making the wings, I printed off like a template, of a shrunken down size of the wings, so I could get like an idea of how big they should be. I considered about maybe doing them as clay, but they wouldn't look the same, about the same size, and that also would have come out a little bit harder to do. So I decided to make a template out of cardboard, then cut it out, so that way the wings would be about like the same size with each wing, and so that way it'd look much better. And the final results of the wings is that like when you put them all together, I realized that the wings are actually longer than the normal Fate. So I realized that just balancing this character is gonna be a huge pain in the ass. So to solve that problem, I took one of these clear brick pieces that I've had in my bin for quite some time, stuck that on, and it was just like, this is beautiful. It's fucking phenomenal. And while I'm at it, with the feet, these were a bit trickier to do. So what I did was, I took like some of the claws that I used for making the Logan minifigure. I had a few extra claws lying around. So what I did was, I took a sand cutter and carefully sliced off the handle pieces for that you would stick in like the hands. I cut those off, then sanded off a little bit to even it out a bit, super glue them onto the feet, and then after they dried, they stayed intact to represent the devil claws that they had. It was probably something that I didn't really need to do, but it was something that I never tried for a minifigure before, so I decided that you know what, fuck it, let's give it a try, see what sort of craziness that we can come up with. And with the final results, I think it came out pretty nice. His legs and his arms, you can see some molding clay onto there. For this whole character, I tried to make it more three-dimensional with clay. As best I could. You can see, it continues on with the other arm and the leg. There's some clay on the chest. The chest could have come out a little bit better. It was a pain to, really figure out how much clay I needed to add, as well as how much room would there be left to paint. And then with the final results, it didn't matter. So it was just yep, I wasted a huge chunk of my time. God damn it. But all in all, with the final result, it looks pretty cool, so I won't complain too much about it. The head, it's a regular minifigure head, but with some added clay with Dante's horns, as well as some of that energy peeking at the top spike, as well as some of his cheeks towards the side with those horns sticking out at the back. You can see a little bit of some spine lines happening here. The back was a bit trickier to find because with some photo references that I found, it mainly all centered around the front of Dante and less on the back. So I had to hop onto the game in gallery mode to get those ideas of how I needed to proceed through for this character. And that's how I was able to do the detailing on the wings. Things are sort of those gaps in between of where the energy is sticking out, and then towards on the front, you see these swirls on here. Whoops, sorry. All right, the swirls, I will say, are not exactly like how they are in the game, but that was something I knew I was going to come across with, because as the way how they're designed, they're so close together. I'm not entirely certain how to proceed for the wings. So to do give sort of that detailing that the wings have, I just went with the best that I could and took the marker and sort of did some swirls in around in between as best I could. as I could, and still have it represent of like that orange energy that's like flowing through the wings as it is in the game. But appearance-wise, I think it turns out pretty nice. Like, it does represent Sin Devil Dante. The face was a bit tedious to do, especially for like the teeth and the eyes. But once I got those out of the way, the rest of the process was pretty good. Now, before we move on to our next figure, we'll take a look at the sword. So yes, as you can tell, this is a new version of Devil Sword Dante. I did consider the idea of having like my original Devil Sword Dante, and sticking it for this character, but upon looking at it further, I wasn't super satisfied with it. I don't know if it was like the sword was too big, the sword was like too thick. It was just going back and forth in my head. It was just like, okay, what the shit do I want to do with this? So I finally decided that, like, you know what? I want to remake the sword. I want to try something different. And I decided to do it sort of like that ignition mode. I'm not sure exactly what you would call it. But for like in the game of how, like, whenever Dante goes into Sin Devil Trigger, or you require those red orb upgrades to supercharge the sword can like split open as sort of a representation of like the demonic energy is so powerful that not even the sword itself can contain it. So I took like one of those I'm not sure what you would call it, but it's like those quick launcher bullets that when you hit the back of it, they go whee towards the back. So I took a couple of those and cut off out of like the launch and the end parts of it, and then sculpted around like first the inside of the sword, so like this orange energy blade. I first sculpted that, then the other blade, then like the outer blade, I sculpted out separately and then cut it down right down the line, glued it in between the blade, I also sanded off a little bit to give it like that edge, which you can kind of see a little bit of clay underneath here, and that was because I accidentally did too much sanding, so the points accidentally came off of it. So I had to add a little extra clay back on, and then repaint it, and I know that the red energy technically doesn't like spread throughout more of like that, those markings in the blade, but I decided to add those as like a cool effect to again show of like the demonic energy coursing through the sword. And when actually doing a size comparison, the sword is just about the size. It's a bit longer than the Rebellion, but shorter than Devil Sword Sparta. I wasn't aiming for it, but now looking at it, I think it actually looks awesome because it kind of represents sense of like the different sizes in the game. So like the only major flaw with this character is that I can't move him at all, not without destroying the paint as well as the clay. So this character, aside from his arms, and I'm pretty sure, I'm not entirely certain about his head, but I don't want to risk it. But aside from the arms as well as the sword, this entire character is immobile. So he's good for like articulation wise in like short films. Probably not in his job description, but for like showcase wise, and for like being on display, I'd say this turned out pretty awesome, and I'm really proud of how this new Devil Sword Dante came out. I'm really glad of how it came out. So then, let's go on to our last minifigure. And last up on our list would be the Super Alpha and Omega, like a Sin Devil Trigger Virgil. Now, before I continue on, I will point out that the Devil Sword that he is carrying here, this is not mine. It is based off of a fan art design. So for the original artist, I will include a link to their website in the description below. So go check them out. They did a fantastic job at designing this sword. So give them credit because they did fucking phenomenal. It was really well done. But anyways, back to the character itself. So this one, the base of it is very similar to Sin Devil Dante, and that's kind of how their devil triggers really look. Like, if you look back at the DMC history and look at each of their devil triggers, even DMC, Devil May Cry, their devil triggers are kind of the same, just with, like, a few differences, like, appearance-wise, as well as color differentiation, sorry, I don't know what came out. But aside from that, they're pretty much the same. That's the same. So with Virgil's character, there is some differences, however. Like, one of the only similarities that they really have is the wings. So as you can see, like, I did the same thing as I did for Dante. Like, cardboard base of the wings, then the blue energy coursing through each of the wings, and then that swirl design. You can also see, however, he has a tail. That was a bit trickier to do, because again, not a lot of photo references towards the back. It was all mainly towards the front. So figuring that out was a bit hard, so I had to hop onto the game to figure that out. You can see a little bit of detailing, like more detailing on the back of the head than with Sin Devil Dante. Then over here you can see of like on the front, you can see of like these blue spikes over here. They're supposed to represent like that blue fire-like energy like going out of his head. Same thing with the sides of his arms. I honestly thought that I'd have to scrap the arms for articulation, but it's actually not too bad. Not too bad. Although now I think this one is stuck. Whoops. And you can kind of see I used two different blues for this character. So like on the arms, you can see of like the little bit of the claw marks on his arms, as well as like these scales. I chose to go ahead with that so that way it stood out a bit more. So that looks a little bit better. The chest wasn't quite as difficult as Sin Devil Dante. Like, the only, like, major three-dimensional piece was, like, this front part here, and the rest is pretty much just hand-drawn, like, so there's sort of like those claws that, like, are on Virgil's torso. So it was a bit tricky to do, especially for those small silver pieces. Well, silver, like, claws, like little claw marks. But I will say, the silver is much easier to work with than the gold. It's a freaking mess. That still to this day, I am having a pain in the ass time trying to figure that out. But it's getting better. You can see like the swirls here, and then same thing with like claw feet. You can see like a little bit of clay like on both sides of the legs. And the legs that I did the same thing with Dante. The face was a bit easier to do, because since I already completed Sin Devil Dante first, I had an idea of how I wanted to approach the face design. So I first did, like, the blue, and then added in, like, the whites for the eyes, and like, the silver teeth. Although, it kind of looks like Virgil's teeth are more gold than silver. But either way, it does represent of, like, some of those teeth marks. And plus, with the fucking gold, I didn't want to make a mess with this character. Look at this character, because I had to recreate the paint again just for fixing Dante's wings, because I made the lines a bit too thick, like I did for Venom, so I scrapped that and fixed those. I didn't want to accidentally replicate that for Virgil's face, so, and that would have been even more of a pain to try to recover, so I went ahead and just kept up with the silver for the teeth, and it actually looks pretty cool. It does kind of represent Virgil's like sort of like his scary face, just and you can also see of like the sides of his head, like he's got that going on like his cheeks, and same thing with the top. I will admit the blue lines could have come out a little bit better, but again, I did not realize that until I had finished the character. Now, looking on the Sin Devil sword, like Devil Sword Virgil. Again, this is not mine. The original artist's website is in the description below, so please go show them some love. And plus, theirs is way more impressive than how this came out. I knew right from the get-go the sword would look nowhere near as beautiful as the original artwork would. Mainly because of when taking like that sort of design and interpreting onto a minifigure, especially one that's almost completely like clay base, was gonna be tricky. So when doing the sword, I painted up in the same coloration and sort of like the same base color for the other Sin Devils. Then went back for the white. I've added like those little spikes those spikes like those little horns, or more like the thorns. Yeah, there we go, thorns. What the hell am I saying? Saying horns. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But adding on like those little thorns on towards the sword. I think these are kind of more like bone. Like bone. Like if you really think about it, I felt like Dante has like those dragon claws at the hilt of the sword. These are kind of more like bone thorns. Thorns, if that makes sense. Makes sense. And then you can see like the blue energy like coursing through the sword. This was actually a blue like launcher piece. Like I chose a blue one for Virgil and an orange one for Dante. I had intended at the time to sort of match it up with the characters. You can see like down here I added in like that special little bits to make the sword a bit longer. It's not quite as long as Devil Sword Dante, but it does represent that. It does represent of like Virgil, of like what Virgil would be like if he had a double sword. In fact, is this about the size of Yamato? Not entirely. It's actually a little bit taller. Like just about best size by size comparison. It's actually a little bit taller, and that was kind of what I was aiming for this sword. I probably could have done a little bit better on sanding, of giving it like a sharper edge, and maybe painting it in like a different blue energy. But all in all, I'd say this turned out pretty cool. So, for Sin Devil Virgil, it was a little bit easier to do because again, after doing Sin Devil Dante, I had an idea of what to do with the character, and with all in all, I'd say this turned out pretty cool. So let's go ahead and wrap this showcase up and begin talking a little bit more about the future. And that does it for this episode of LEGO Arts. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and this might be the last Devil May Cry LEGO showcase that I'll do. It's mainly because I don't know who else to build. Like, I've done a good majority of, like, the crew, like, the main characters, Dante, Nero, Lady, Trish, Virgil, V, Kyrie, and Nico. I don't know who else I could build. And I was kind of, like, the aim is that, I wanted to do Devil Trigger for a little while, but since I was working on, like, DMC 4, and I'm gonna go back into Subnautica, I got to try to finish that up, as well as a few other games, and also when getting started on some other showcases, I couldn't get around to the Devil Trigger edition, but since the end of the year is coming up, I figured that, like, you know what? If I'm gonna try to do, like, one of my last showcases this year, I want it to be something awesome. So I finally sat down and focused on doing DMC Wave 3. So unless there are some other characters in, like, the Devil May Cry series that I could do, or maybe some other versions of, like, some of the other characters, like maybe different Devil Triggers or different versions of Dante, Virgil, and any other characters, I might go back and try those. But for now, I think we're gonna put DMC to a closing until further notice. But all in all, I'm pretty satisfied with how these Devil Triggers came out. The weapons were a little bit tricky, but with the final results, I think they have to be one of my favorite weapons that I have sculpted thus far, because they're really, really well done, and I'm really satisfied with the final result. So, reason why I say that this might be the last showcase of 2019 is because I've been very busy lately, like these next few days, I'm gonna be on a break a little bit from theater, but then the weekend coming up, I have, like, some final shows that I'm going to do, and then on the 18th through the 23rd, I'm going on vacation, so I won't be able to upload any videos regardless if it's showcase or let's play or any video really until I get back. So the latest that I'll be able to do a video will be like the 26th or the 27th, maybe a little bit earlier if I can try to squeeze a video on like the 24th or something. But if I don't, the latest that I'll be able to do a video will be after Christmas and before New Year's. So to give you guys a clarification that if you're wondering, like, has he died? Is he leaving? Neither of those is happening. happening. I'm just going on vacation, so I want to let you guys know of what's gonna be happening. But if I can do at least, like, if I can finish up one of my showcases, the cases that I'm working on before the end of the year, I might be able to do the video. If not, next year, some of the showcases that we're gonna be seeing, like some of the first few showcases we'll be seeing, will be Ruby Volume 7, Showdown Bandit Wave 2, and a solo showcase of the Mandalorian. I'm working on a Mandalorian minifigure. I figure that's, I actually had to change of how to proceed through that character, and once I'm finished and able to upload the video, I'll explain in more detail as to what happened, and why I had to do that. So all in all, I'd say the showcase came out pretty cool. It did give me an idea to try out like some new things. Their only major flaw is that aside from Nero, the other two can't move at all. So they're now on the list of like weirdest characters I've built, next to like the ink versions of the Butcher Gang, as well as I think Nightmare Run would be on that list too. Because they're a bit weird when you really look at them. Which, speaking of Bendy, I am planning on going back to Bendy, but not until after Dark Revival gets released. In case that they show like some more characters, and that way I can also get like a good idea of how to make their new character Audrey, or is it Audrey? Aubrey? I suddenly forgot how to pronounce that name. God damn it. I'm sorry. But anyways, as soon as I get like an idea of like if there are any new characters in Dark Revival aside from Audrey, I will do like Lego Bendy will return to the channel, but it won't be until after Dark Revival gets released, which, now that I think about it, might come out next year, because the end of fall is coming up very, very close, and there hasn't been any new updates. But anyways, those are going to be all the stuff for the future. So again, if this is the last showcase of 2019, I'm glad it came out with the final results of something a little bit unorthodox, and also something crazy is it that we do on the channel, because that's what we like to do here. So anyways, if you guys would like to see more videos like this in the future, be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. It really helps us work on Let's Plays, Lego projects, and mail it out some fun. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, hit that like button, comment below what you think, share with your friends, subscribe to YouTube, follow me on Twitch, and here's out for the road. Ow! Woo! Thank you guys, and we'll see you next time. What do you guys, Smooth Rises?